All right. Numbers 21. So last week, as we concluded chapter 20, um, we're kind of entering a new phase as they make their way from the wandering into the kind of final path up the side of the Jordan River to be ready to enter the land. And the last thing that we noticed was Aaron's death. And I really do think that that is kind of a symbolic moment, a significant moment as far as it goes for the nation. Here is a leader of the people who has died, one who has been decided that he will not go into the land, particularly with regards to the waters at Meribah in chapter 20. So now that is over. We'll see more of that. Let's see, what is it? Chapter 26, I believe, is the new census. And that will be even more of a kind of a definitive moment to say, okay, we're ready to go into the land. But in chapter 21, we come to a series of stories that kind of follow a similar parallel to some earlier stories. So remember in Exodus 17, Moses struck the rock, and then they fought against the Amalekites, and Aaron and Hur held Noah's. I'm gonna get the names right in a second. Held Moses' hands up, and then there was a plague that came through and killed. So it's a similar pattern as what we're going to see here in chapter 20 and 21. You're going to have the striking, the water, and then a moment of deliverance. So in chapter 21 and verse 1, when the Canaanite, the king of Arad, who lived in the Negeb, and remember the Negeb is that southern portion, kind of below the Red Sea. Hebron would be a part of that. Beersheba would be a part of that Negeb. Heard that Israel was coming by the way of Atharim, he fought against Israel and took some of them captive. And Israel vowed a vow to the Lord and said, if you will indeed give this people into my hand, then I will devote their cities to destruction. And the Lord heeded the voice of Israel and gave over the Canaanites, and they devoted them and their cities to destruction. So the name of the place was called Hormah. Now, does anybody happen to remember? I did not remember this until somebody else pointed it out. Do you remember where Hormah is mentioned previously? How it got its name in the original situation?
So when the Israelites were defeated.
Yes, it's when the Israelites were defeated, when they said they were going to take the land anyway, and they went in. And so this is Numbers 14:45. Then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who lived in that hill country came down and struck them and beat them down as far as Hormah. Now, what's the difference in Numbers 14:45 and Numbers 21? What? God was with them. That's the difference. Same place, same foes. Not exactly. We're 40 years later, but same kind of people, same location. God was with them. That makes all the difference. And I think that's the lesson of, we only get 3 verses about that. But the reference to Hormah. Now, it's interesting because Hormah originally got its name because it was the destruction of the Israelites on that occasion. Its name is maybe re-solidified as Hormah, meaning destruction, because of Israel destroying the Canaanites there. And I believe that word Hormah there is connected to the Hebrew word harem, which when you say devoted to destruction is H-E-R-E-M in our letters, harem. It was given to God, completely devoted in destruction to God. Okay, any thoughts through verse 3? Anybody? Okay, you want to take us from 4 on?
Then they journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom. And the soul of the people became very discouraged on the way. And the people spoke against God and against Moses. Why have you brought us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food, no water, and our soul loathes this worthless bread. So the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and many of the people of Israel died. Therefore the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord that he may take the serpents away from us. So Moses prayed for the people. Then the Lord said to Moses, make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole, and it shall be that every one who is bitten, when he looks at it, shall live. So Moses made a bronze serpent and put it on a pole, and so it was. If a serpent had bitten anyone, then when he looked at the bronze serpent, he lived. So the people, why are they discouraged? They're going the wrong direction, aren't they? It says they're going south, right? They need to be going north, right? And they're taking this long route around Edom, and so they begin to complain. And it was a terrible way to travel. The land was terrible to travel through, and so they complained about no water, no food, and even the manna, which they said it was loathsome. Uh, that means worthless bread, right? And this is another slap in the face of God, I believe. Uh, but here the people are murmuring again, and Jehovah sends snakes, and it bit many of the people, and they died. And it caused them. Do you have any information about the fiery serpents?
I have just the reference to the fiery is the sting of the poison or the
Okay.
venom, I guess it would be.
That's what Bob Waldron mentioned.
That's
yes.
probably where I got it.
But Israel realizes what they've done, and they asked Moses to pray to God for them and take the snakes away, and he did. And so what I would like to ask you is, God could have healed the people without asking them to do anything, right? And but that's not the way God works. A person must have faith and enough to obey his commandments in order to receive the blessings that God gives. Even that's true today too, right?
Well, one reason I think also too is, I mean, here all the time these people's been fed, watered, and then they start murmuring just because of going around the other way. I mean, they got God with them, they done defeated this group of people, and they actually totally lost faith and respect to God when they started murmuring. And I think that when God sent these serpents down there to bit them, and then he had Moses put this bronze serpent on a pole, it was, if y'all really don't have faith in me, the only ones that have faith is actually going to obey what Moses said that I told him to look at the thing, and if you don't, you need to die. I mean, he's given them every kind of opportunity in the world. Yeah. They still, I mean, even after all he travels by far at night and a cloud in the day, and they still don't believe. I mean, I don't know of any other time in history that God actually showed himself on a current basis to the people all the time. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. They pray to take the serpents away, and he doesn't take the serpents away, but he provides a remedy. Right. That I think that's an important lesson, is that these were the consequences of their actions. He doesn't take those away, but he does provide a remedy for those who would be bitten.
And it requires faith on their part,
which makes it a perfect preview of what God would do in Jesus. Mm-hmm. In fact, Jesus mentions this in John 3:14 and 15, when he says, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so will the Son of Man be lifted up. Well, what's the idea there? It's he's not taking away necessarily the consequences of our decision, but he's providing a remedy. Maybe the physical consequences may still remain, sin still remains, but there's a remedy for it. And what do you have to do? Well, you have to turn and look, and you have to, and it's more than, it's trusting him and doing what he said, and that's what comes.
Well, man has a part to play in his salvation, exactly right. Actually.
Do you think this is a test for Moses? Because, he said before, don't make any carved images or whatever. And here he specifically commands to make a carved image.
It's interesting.
It is.
To heal the people.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a test for him. It will end up being a test for Israel, because they will turn this into an idol. 2 Kings 18 talks about they had to destroy it in the days of Hezekiah because they had begun to worship it. and
He crushed pieces.
yeah, what they call it, Nehushtan, what they had named the snake, which is just like people to take the good things God gives them and turn them into idols. But yeah, that is interesting. I wonder if the implication of not making carved images is before idolatry. But I mean, you're right that he does say not to make it at all. So, and I don't know. I've never thought of it as a test for Moses before. That's something I'll think about.
You know, we hear a question, I'm sure everybody's heard it. If God is a living God, why does he allow bad things to happen?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's kind of right here, what's happening right here.
Yeah.
You know, why didn't he just let us wipe these people out and go right on through it?
Mm-hmm.
It would have been easy.
Yeah, that's right.
I think the reason that he don't do that is the same thing that he puts us here on earth. I mean, we're born, but the time we live, we're actually tested. We're going through a test
Mm-hmm.
on whether that we'll seek after him and obey him. And basically that was a test. I mean, we don't have a life of perfect. I mean, we have times when it's bad, when it's up, when it's down. But if you still follow him and seek after him, he'll take care of you. But if while you're going through that test, if you end up forsaking him, you lose it all.
Yeah.
Well, when I put it is,
We hear complaint. Yeah. So let's think about that for just a moment. Do we know why he won't let them take Edom's land? Do you remember? I think he mentions this, especially in Deuteronomy. We hadn't gotten there this time, but
They were there.
what he had promised. Yeah. So he says, just like I'm giving Israel the land of Canaan, I've given Edom to Esau's descendants. It was what I promised. And what I'm thinking about in that way is this: they couldn't see the whole picture, perhaps, and God is doing more than just whatever involves me, right? He has a much bigger, and so I can't see the whole picture, and God can. And so sometimes maybe I lose sight. I certainly don't have sight of it, but I lose focus on the fact that He is working out a much bigger thing, and then so I tend to complain.
they didn't even want to wipe out even. They just wanted to take the house.
That's exactly right. You're right. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. I am going to just kind of look at verses 10 through 18. I always leave you with a
I'm
hard.
glad you got that.
Or do you want me to read it? I will try.
No, you don't have to.
Oh, thank you. I will say this. There are a couple of just references here. For example, verse 14 said in the book of the wars of the Lord. We don't have that, but they did. They had a copy of this evidently, and it was a record of some battles. And it was this talks about the border between Moab and the Amorites. And then they come to a well, and the Lord says, gather the people together, verse 16, that I may give them water. Well, how is he going to give them water? In this case, evidently he provides a well or points them to a well or makes a well appear somehow. And Israel sang this song, verse 18, spring up a well, sing to it, the well that the princes made, that the nobles of the people dug with the scepter and their staves. And from the wilderness they went on to Mattanah, and from Mattanah to Nahaliel, and from Nahaliel to Bamoth, and from Bamoth to the valley lying in the region of Moab, by the top of Pisgah that looks down on the desert. All right, so Mount Pisgah, we probably know it a little better as Mount Nebo, and maybe next time I'll have my charts and I'll have a picture here. Mount Nebo is a mountain on the east side of the Jordan River, right near the Jordan River, from which Moses is going to be able to look over at the land. But they're in the plains of Moab, right, and they're ready. They're making final preparations to go on over. Now, the fact that they're in the territory of Moab is going to come into play in chapters 22 through 24, but really even more than that, 25, chapter 31. The fact they're in Moab is going to be relevant all the way through those chapters. But we'll look at that more in a bit. But Mount Pisgah there is what we sometimes call Mount Nebo, and this will be the place from which Moses delivers the book of Deuteronomy, and that's where that'll all happen. All right. Any thoughts through 20? You have something?
I think it's interesting in 17 and 18. So it seems like the Lord's providing for them here.
Yes.
When they sing their song,
Yeah.
it seems to me that they recognize.
Yeah, they recognize the diggers, but so that makes me think. I think I've said, makes me think that maybe the Lord pointed them into the direction of this. They had to dig it, but then they just recognized the digging and not the provision. Yeah, pretty sorry.
It refers to in Psalms 84:6 that God actually, when they dug the wells, that God actually brought rain from the heavens and filled the pool. In Psalms 84:6.
That's interesting. As into the valley of Baca, they make it a spring. All right. Well, there you go. Mr. Raymond, you were going to say something?
Yeah, so that's where we got huge question
Yeah.
about why we suffer.
Mm-hmm.
It started all the way back to Adam and Eve. When they sinned, he put them out and made them start suffering. And it goes on and on. Today, sin is what caused us to suffer.
Yeah. All suffering is at least an indirect result of sin, and some suffering is a direct result of our own sin. That's not to say that all suffering is. Their suffering was a direct result of their sin. It was a punishment from God. But even what we would think of as the ordinary suffering of life is a result of the fact that we live in a broken world because of our rebellion against God. That's good. I mean, it's not good, but it is true nonetheless. All right. Verse 21. You have anything else? All right. Verse 21, if you want to take us through that.
Then Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, saying, "Let me pass through your land. We will not turn aside into fields or vineyards. We will not drink water from wells. We will go by the king's highway until we have passed through your territory." But Sihon would not allow Israel to pass through his territory. So Sihon gathered all his people together and went out against Israel in the wilderness. And he came to Jahaz and fought against Israel. Then Israel defeated him with the edge of the sword and took possession of his land from the Arnon to the Jabbok, as far as the people of Ammon, for the border of the people of Ammon was fortified. So Israel took all these cities, and Israel dwelt in all the cities of the Amorites, in Heshbon and all its villages. For Heshbon was the city of Sihon, king of the Amorites, who had fought against the former king of Moab, and had taken all his land from his hand as far as the Arnon. I guess I can stop right there. King Sihon, when they arrived at Mount Nebo there, they asked King Sihon if they could pass through his land peacefully. Now, he was the king of the Amorites. And he refused to grant them permission. But what did he do? He mobilized his army and he attacked them, didn't he? So he was the aggressor here. And anyway, Moses in Deuteronomy gives us a little bit more information about this. God had told Moses in Deuteronomy 2 and 31 that he would deliver Sihon into his hands, into Israel's hands. Anyway, they took the capital of Heshbon and all the rest of his territory, and they moved into those cities, and they dwelt there. And it tells where the borders of Sihon's kingdom reached from the Arnon in the south to the Jabbok River in the north. And it went all the way over to the Jordan River in the west and the land of the Ammonites in the east. It's hard. Don't get the Ammonites and the Amorites confused because it's easy to do.
Yeah. But
go ahead.
Yeah, and that is an important distinction to make. So I think it's 23 times that I just made a list of passages that refer to this occasion later. I mean, there's not many events that are referred to that many times after the fact, but this was a significant moment because the defeat of this king becomes a preview of the defeats. So they're actually defeating cities. They're defeating a king here, and this is going to be a preview. So in the book of Deuteronomy, it's referenced a bunch of times. as a promise of what God, he says, you've seen what I've already done. Here's what I'm going to do. And so it's referenced in the Old Testament, referenced 23 times. And as you may mention, it's important to keep the Ammonites, Amorites, and Moabites all kind of distinct. So Moab and Ammon, how are they connected to the story? Whose descendants are they? Lot. That's right. So Lot had the daughters. And one son was named Moab, and the other one was Ben-Ami, I think, right? And so his descendants became the Ammonites. So they are relatives. It is similarly said about them things that were said about Edom. Now, Moab is not going to get the same leniency that Edom got, or that the Ammonites are going to get because of their hostility to Israel in the next few chapters. But I think they would have been given that if that's what they had, if they had accepted that piece. Now, Sihon and the Amorites, not the same. Not the same. They were not connected to the family of Abraham. In fact, really, they were kind of invaders into that whole area to everybody. The Amorites were more of kind of a semi-nomadic people that would just kind of move in and take wherever. And the next poem in verses 27 through 30, I think basically summarizing that poem is, here's the mighty King Sihon who had come in and had taken the land of Moab, and Israel defeats them in a single blow. And so they had sung songs about how great Sihon was and how powerful he was, and the Israelite singers say, and we just crushed him, right? Because they had the Lord with it.
And you said that it was mentioned so many times about this battle.
Yeah.
The historian says that Jephthah makes use of this event, this war against the Amorites 260 years afterwards.
He does.
When Israel's title to the country was questioned, and they showed the documentation that they owned.
Yeah, that's right. So, so there will be a disagreement, and Jephthah will use that. That's exactly right. Judges 11, I think it is. Is that right?
I read the Amorites were the strongest of the Canaanite tribes, too.
Yeah.
And they were wicked people, very wicked.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, and that will be, so we will see that even more in verses 31 and following. We find out actually more details about some of this in the book of Deuteronomy, because Moses reflects on these occasions. And he says, okay, you've seen what's just happened. Let me tell you what all that means. You've defeated Sihon and his cities. They had walled and fortified cities. Here's a king. You defeat him. Og, that we're going to see in verses 31 and following, he is the king of Bashan, or Bashan. Anybody remember anything interesting about Og? He was tall, or at least his bed was.
He was a giant.
He may have just had an extra big bed, like a California king or something. But no, I think it was at an iron bed that was 14 feet long. And you assume that that's not just for extra leg room. You assume it's because he needed it that big. But remember what their concern was going into the land? They were afraid of walled cities and, well, here's a giant. And they take him down. The Lord takes him down. And so Moses will use that in Deuteronomy 1, 2, 3, and 4 and say, don't let your heart melt when you go into the land, because I'm making the people of the land's heart melt because they're hearing about what you did to Sihon and to Og. You're taking down walled cities and giants, so have faith and go in. And that's what they'll do this second time. So just reading a little bit here in 31 and through 35. Thus Israel lived in the land of the Amorites, and Moses sent to spy out Jazer, and they captured its villages and dispossessed the Amorites who were there. Then they turned and went up by the way to Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, came out against them, he and all his people, to battle at Edrei. But the Lord said to Moses, do not fear him, for I have given him into your hand, and all his people and his land, and you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon. So they defeated him and his sons and all his people until he had no survivor left, and they possessed his land. Now, I take it to be that this was not really intended to be the land that they fought for. Now, there will be Israelites who live in this part, but this wasn't even in what God had promised to Abraham. It wasn't what they described as Canaan. This was plus. This was extra. And that's so on the front end. That's exactly right. Yes. So now we're talking about stuff on the east side and not on the west side.
I also think that God used this event to show the people that it don't matter that they're giants, they ain't nothing but worms when it comes up to the power of me, God.
Right.
And so that any other God, race, as they do, when they do finally get to go in, the giants that are there, they shouldn't fear them.
That's right.
Because God take them out.
Amen.
So, just going back to the Amorites for a minute. So, obviously, there are lots of parallels between Amorites and Edomites and how those situations were handled and how they're different. I wonder if the Edomites ever looked at this and were like,
yeah.
We got lucky
Yeah,
there.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, seeing the Amorites come against them and get destroyed. Because the Edomites would have known about the strength of the Amorites too. And yeah, it's interesting. All right, anything else through chapter 21? All right. Well, I think we're good to move into chapter 22 then. And this is a interesting set of events with the connection between Balak and Balaam. And so we'll look at that for a few minutes. You want to get us started there?
Yeah. Now they're very close to the borders of Moab here, and they haven't attacked them yet. But let's read the first 4 verses. The children of Israel moved and camped in the plains of Moab on the side of the Jordan across from Jericho. Now Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that what Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was exceedingly afraid of the people because they were many. And Moab was sick with dread because of the children of Israel. So Moab said to the elders of Midian, Now this company will lick up everything around us, as an ox licks up the grass off the field. And Balak, the son of Zippor, was king of the Moabites at this time. So he saw all the Israelites and what they had done to the Amorites. And he was very afraid because of their numbers and their strength, it says. But just think about it. The massive amount of people at your border, and they just overthrew a nation that you were subject to yourself. So that's enough to cause a lot of fear and anxiety, isn't it? And so he really didn't know what Israel was up to. And so he didn't know exactly what they were going to do next. But he sent messengers to the elders of Midian, it says. And he told them, he said, if we don't do something about this situation, then we're in trouble. And go ahead.
Yeah. So Moab is the territory. So if you have in your mind the Dead Sea, just to the right of the Dead Sea, that's Moab. Edom is below the Dead Sea, and then Midian would be below that. So that's kind of giving. So they're kind of all in this region. So the notice in verse, you made it to verse 7. Well, let's see.
I went through 4.
Verse 5. So he sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river, and I take that to be the Euphrates over in Mesopotamia, in the land of the sons of his people, to call him, saying, Behold, a people came out of Egypt. Behold, they cover the surface of the land, and they are settled opposite me. So now please come, curse this people for me, since they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I may be able to strike them down and drive them out of the land, for I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. So they want Balaam to come, this prophet, and we don't know anything previously about Balaam except for this. And then in verse 7, so the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian went away with the fees for divination in their hands. So they're going to pay Balaam to come. They came to Balaam and spoke Balak's words to him. And he said to them, Spend the night here, and I will bring word back to you as Yahweh may speak to me. That raises other questions. How does this person so far away know about Yahweh? Well, evidently, word had spread, and people knew about it. And I think this is evidence that there were people all throughout the world that knew about the true God of the Bible, not just in Israel. and that God had had interactions with people wherever they may have been. And they came to Balaam, this is the end of verse 8. And the leaders of Moab stayed with Balaam. Then God came to Balaam and said, "Who are these men with you?" And Balaam said to God, "Balak the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent word to me. Behold, there is a people who came out of Egypt, and they cover the surface of the land. Now come, curse them for me. Perhaps I may be able to fight against them and drive them out." And God said to Balaam, "Do not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed." So Balaam arose in the morning and said to Balak's leaders, "Go back to your land, for Yahweh has refused to allow me to go with you." And the leaders of Moab arose and came to Balak and said, "Balaam refused to go with us." All right, so Balaam communicates with God. God communicates back with Balaam, and he doesn't seem to be surprised by this. He seems to anticipate that he's going to. So I think he has had some interaction with the Lord before, and God says, "Tell them no, because these are my people, and you're not going to curse them." And so he sends the people of Moab back on their way.
Balaam, he was a prophet, wasn't he?
He was, yeah.
But secular history, Josephus says that he mixed his prophecies with sorcery, and he followed God or Jehovah only because it suited his interest, and so Balaam was a bad man, even though he was a prophet.
Yeah. And it does seem at first we'd say, "All right, Balaam, God said send them back," and Balaam says, "Okay, I'll send them back." And if that was the end of the story, we might think more favorably of Balaam, but the story keeps going. So,
and he had a reputation of being able to curse and bless, and it come to pass, and so he was famous for that, you might say. And that's the reason Balak sends for him. But
I think I made it down to verse 15.
15. Then Balak again sent princes more numerous and more honorable than they. They came to Balaam and said to him, "Thus says Balak the son of Zippor, please let nothing hinder you from coming to me, for I will certainly honor you greatly, and I will do whatever you say to me. Therefore, please come curse this people for me." So Balak is given another shot, right? He's really wanting Balaam to come and curse the people, and then Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, "Though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the word of the Lord my God to do less or more." So Balaam actually says, "No, I can't come, and it doesn't matter what you give me. I can't go against the word of the Lord." He knows who the Lord is. He knows his power, and he knows he's only a sorcerer who practices magic, I guess you might say. And and then verse 19, "Now therefore, please, you also stay here tonight, that I may know what more the Lord will say to me." And so he's inviting them. He's hanging on to them, isn't he? He's not saying just, go back home. I can't help you. He's wanting them to stay, and he's wanting to get some more information from God.
I think it's not that he's wanting to get any more information. He sees all that wealth that they've done brought there, and he's thinking he can talk God into letting him go to where he can get all the gold.
Yeah, right. What he says to them is that he wants more information. I will know what else Yahweh will say to me. He wants permission. That's right.
And in verse 20, "And God came to Balaam at night and said to him, If the men come to call you, rise and go with them, but only the word which I speak to you, that you shall do." So Balaam rose in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went with the princes of Moab. So God told him he could go, didn't he? But he could only say what words he spoke to him.
Yeah. And I don't know that really God's will on this is changing, right? But I think he's allowing Balaam to go in order to teach him a lesson, to teach Balak a lesson, and really to teach us a lesson too, even though we're far. But his desire wasn't for him to go, and
No.
we'll see that even more even as we move on.
Right.
And so it may seem like God changed his mind. Well, if you ask twice, maybe God will change his mind. Well, that's not really what's happening. It's just that he's saying, if you're going to go, just go on and go then, and see how it works out for you. So it's not going to work out well.
And I think if he would have just, I mean, he knew what God had already said.
That's right.
If he looked at it with honest heart, he would have
Yes.
not asked.
Yeah, he wanted to restudy the issue, and God allowed him to do it, but he gives him warning signs even after this to not do it. Anything else? Other comments?
Love the money.
That's right. Yeah, and later on, Balaam's going to be referenced several times, and it will be his greed, his covetousness that's pointed out. That's what's driving. All right, let's pick up in verse 22. But God was angry because he was going. And I think you can imagine Balaam saying, but you told me I could go. It's like when I asked Lydia twice about going somewhere, and the first time she said no, and the second time I asked, she said, well, just go on then. Right? And then I go ahead and go. And I was like, well, you said I could go. Why are you so mad? It's like, but it's worse because it's the Lord. And so the angel of Yahweh took his stand in the way as an adversary against him. Now he's riding on his donkey, and his 2 young men were with him. Then the donkey saw the angel of Yahweh standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and the donkey turned off from the way and went into the field. So Balaam struck the donkey to turn it back into the way. Then the angel of Yahweh stood in a narrow path of the vineyards, with a wall on this side and a wall on that side, and the donkey saw the angel of Yahweh and pressed itself to the wall and pressed Balaam's foot against the wall, so he struck it again. And the angel of Yahweh passed on ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no room to turn the right hand or the left. Then the donkey saw the angel of Yahweh and lay down under Balaam. So Balaam was angry and struck the donkey with his stick. And Yahweh opened the mouth of the donkey. And it said to Balaam, what have I done to you, that you have struck me these 3 times? Then Balaam said to the donkey, because this is a perfectly rational thing to happen. No, because Balaam, because you have made a mockery of me. If there had been a sword in my hand, I would have killed you by now. And the donkey said to Balaam, am I not your donkey on which you have ridden all your life to this day? Have I ever been accustomed to do so to you? And he said, no. All right, so the donkey is wiser than Balaam at this moment. He can see the angel. And I think basically what the donkey is saying in verse 30 is that the fact that I'm acting this way should have been a warning to you. Should have been a sign that something's going wrong because I don't act this way. And you'll notice in verse 31 that then Balaam will see what was going on. But he uses the donkey to speak to Balaam. And at this point, if I'm Balaam, then maybe I'm getting the idea that the Lord doesn't want me to go. And but you'll see.
Actually, Balaam, you don't get that.
No, you don't get that. If you're Balaam, you don't. If you're somebody normal, maybe. God will actually tell him to go on with them. But I think it's now to make a point more than it is showing approval of what Balaam's doing. All right, any thoughts through verse 30? Anything else?
It's almost like he's so zoned in on what he wants to do
Yeah.
that it doesn't even seem on.
That's right. I think you're right. Yeah, single-minded focus on that. And maybe so focused that he can't see the angel because the Lord's going to make that visible to him. And if he's, I don't know. I think you're exactly right there. This is encouraging to me as a gospel preacher. If he can use a donkey, then maybe he can use me too. So anyway, all right. I'm going to take us from 31 on. We got about 5 minutes left.
Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed his head and fell flat on his face. And the angel of the Lord said to him, why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out to stand against you, because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, surely I would have also killed you by now and let her live. And Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned, for I did not know you stood in the way against me. Therefore, if it displeases you, I will turn back. Then the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, go with the men, but only the word that I speak to you, that you shall speak. So Balaam went with the princes of Balak, Now when Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at the city of Moab, which is on the border of the Arnon, the boundary of the territory. Then Balak said to Balaam, did I not earnestly send to you, calling for you? Why did you not come to me? Am I not able to honor you? And Balaam said to Balak, look, I have come to you. Now have I any power at all to say anything? The word that God puts in my mouth, that I must speak. So Balaam went with Balak, and they came to Kirjath Huzoth. Then Balak offered oxen and sheep, and he sent some to Balaam and to the princes who were with him. So it says that Balaam's eyes were finally opened, right? And he saw the situation that he was in. And you want to make some final comments on that?
Well, just to say, notice in verse, let me see here, the end of verse 34. If it is evil in your sight, I will turn back. You see how he's phrasing that? I think that's the issue. So God's going to say, go on. If Balaam had said, okay, made a mistake, I'm headed back. Right? But, well, if this isn't what you want, I'll go back. And I think that what he's trying to leave room, he wants to do this, and he's trying to leave room to do it. And God is going to say, all right. Now, it's not going to work out for Balaam. It's not going to work out for Balak. It's not going to work out for Moab. It's only going to work to Israel's benefit. And that's why God is allowing him to do it. Now, so I think what you've got with Balaam is you have somebody who is aware enough of God that he doesn't want to do something that would be just outright disobedience. But he wants money so much that he's willing to push it just as far as he can. That he's not that concerned with. He's not concerned with pleasing God. He's just concerned with not getting destroyed. He will get destroyed, but not at this exact moment. But he does recognize his limitations to be able to prophesy. So Balak is upset. Why didn't you come? And Balaam's like, what do you mean, why didn't I come? I'm right here. And he says, the word that God puts in my mouth, that I shall speak. That's all he could do. And he was absolutely constrained in that way. Now, notice in verse 41, it happened in the morning that Balak took Balaam and brought him up to the high places of Baal, and he saw from there the end of the camp of the people. So where are they going to do this cursing on the people of Israel? The place where they worship idols. The place where they worship Baal. You may hear people pronounce it Baal, but I've pronounced it Baal my whole life. And he doesn't care because he's not real. So we'll say however we want to. And so Baal this is the high places of Baal. And I mean, I don't know if Balaam would have been effective anyway, but he's certainly not going to be effective here. There's this maybe this idea that if we can get the spiritual powers to help us against Israel, then maybe that'll be some assistance. And they will try that a couple of times. They'll move to different places. Well, maybe if we stand here, it'll work. Well, that's not how it works, because God is God of the whole earth. And Baal may be the Moabite god, supposedly, but he's not over Yahweh. He's not over the Lord. Okay, any comments through chapter 22?
The phrase we use, God's given Balaam enough rope to hang.
That's exactly right.
That's what's going to happen.
That's what's going to happen, for sure. All right, very good. Thank you all for your comments, and we'll pick up with chapter 23, Lord willing.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.